So we have been looking at the general idea about yoga, the scientific aspects of yoga, the overall impact and effect of yoga on the practitioners, and the philosophy of yoga, which also we have discussed, what it means and why it is done, and so on and so forth. Now we have out of the Ashtangas, 8 Angas, we are left with Dhyana and Samadhi. So we will deal with that as much as we can today. So first, Dhyana. Now Dhyana, we discussed yesterday, Dharana is one-pointed attention. Pratyahara leads to Dhyana. Actually, all the Angas of yoga lead one from the other to the next. Like yama niyamas lead you, take you on to a calmer mind if you follow the yama niyamas, at least to some extent, and good posture, so asana. Then from asana, if you sit in a proper asana, then it is easy to do your pranayama. So we discussed the prana and the pranayama and everything in detail. I don't think I have done more detailed classes on this subject. Then from pranayama we went to pratyahara. Through the practice of pratyahara, it's a natural and easy step to go into Dharana. So we discussed Dharana. Dharana is one-pointed attention exclusively on anything that you desire to fix your attention, not what draws you. There are two ways. There are certain things that tempt you to look at them and you are fully absorbed. That can't be called Dharana. Dharana is when I deliberately decide, this is what I'm going to fix my attention on, and do that to the exclusion of all other attention. Now when this happens, it leads to Dhyana. Dhyana is continuation of that attention for a length of time. It has variously been described as like the continuous dhara that appears when you pour oil from one vessel to another. Yeah. Now, dharana is something which is deliberately done by us. But when it becomes dhyana, there is no deliberate attempt on anybody's part. In the depths of dhyana, even the idea that I am doing dhyana disappears. Why? Because my existence or the existence of my individual mind as a conglomeration of thoughts, you know that you cannot conceive of a mind without thought. Some people say, oh, I am completely thoughtless. Now that is a thought. That thoughtless is a thought. It's not outside the scope of thought. It's still a thought. So, mind means, chitta means thought, in its normal sense of the term. Now in the beginning, Patanjali says yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. So when you say vritti, it includes thoughts, good, bad, low, high, meditating, not meditating, everything is included in that vritti. Good vrittis and bad vrittis, positive vrittis, negative. But what is intended is to be free of all vrittis. How does that happen? Now the practice of yoga begins with trying to change the mind, which is generally, in most cases, in what is known as tamoguna and a little bit of rajoguna. Activity, action, movement, plus a great deal of laziness, inertia, thoughts of hurting others, negative thoughts, they're all part of the chitta, the vrittis, part of the vrittis. Now, by the practice of yoga, the yogi attempts to shift from the tamoguna to rajoguna. Now, the only way to shift out of tamoguna, which is darkness, and which is down, which is negative, and which is sleep, and which is laziness, and so on. Not normal sleep, but laziness, is activity. So, the mind is made active in positive ways, which is rajoguna. You cannot suddenly shift from tamoguna to sattva. Which is why Swami Vivekananda, when he started the Ramakrishna mission, said, you guys cannot suddenly sit down and meditate 24 hours because there is a lot of tamoguna in the mind. The only way to turn tamoguna away, to change your guna, is to do some useful activity, especially activity which is good for others and not only for the self. Then it becomes karma yoga. When this activity is done gradually, otherwise what happens? Many people mistake laziness for sattva guna. There also it is quiet. Here also there is no activity. I know many people, young and old, who smoke pot and think they are there in samadhi, in sattva guna, when actually they are in tamoguna. Even some sadhus, many sadhus. So, from tamoguna to sattva-guna, still there are vrittis. Rajoguna. Rajoguna also is a vritti, accepted. Now, from there, the mind becomes purified and clearer. How? Because the clutter in the mind is caused due to too much of only self-involvement and self-interest. When that is slowly out, at least to some extent, then the Rajoguna slowly turns into Sattva. Still there is a vritti. The Sattva vritti is there. Right. So when I am meditating, which is a good act, which is a sattvic act, I am eating sattvic food, I am doing good things, I am a sattvic person, good, up to that we have come. So the vrittis have been purified up to there. But because the vrittis still exist as sattva, my limited mind is still there. In a good way. There is nothing wrong. My limited mind. What Patanjali is aiming at is the unlimited mind, not my little mind, however good it is. So therefore, from Dharana, after a great deal of deep Dharana, one-pointed attention, what happens is that little mind, which may have turned sattvic, may have, also that vritti also disappears. Now what happens? This is very interesting. So we are going to do the next part, which is samadhi. Now what happens? Interesting. Consciousness is there. All the vrittis have disappeared in dhyana because it's an effortless dhyana. I'm not there doing any. In the beginning there is effort in dharana. It's effortless. In that effortless movement, me as a small individual with my little likes and dislikes and my idiosyncrasy, everything disappears. But I'm not unconscious. I am very conscious. There is consciousness. It's not me that is conscious, but the chitta as consciousness freed of all the vrittis. That chitta can no longer be called an individual. It is Purusha. Now, when this is understood, then Kaivalya takes place. The state which Patanjali, which Yoga Darsana, even Sankhya Darsana, calls as Kaivalya, freedom. freedom from the small ID, which is the cause of trouble, all of us. When everything is fine, that small ID is happy. But when some little thing, this small ID gets into trouble. Now that all the vrittis are gone, the chitta has freed itself from all vrittis, even sattvic vrittis do not exist. In that quietness, there no longer remains the individual chitta. Chitta now is Purusha itself, or some people say it reflects the Purusha, whatever it is. We can look at it in either way. And when it reflects the Purusha, it is understood that there is only one Purusha, one consciousness, and no many multiple consciousnesses. The multiple appearance of one as many is because of the vrittis. When the vrittis are gone, there is only one, then there is freedom. See, problem is when there are two, and there is only one. What is the problem? Nothing. The Advaitic philosophy also in another way goes to the same point. Now some people ask me, then what about people who follow devotional practice, bhakti? Is always God and there is you. You must remember that all great bhaktas in the height of their bhakti don't even remember that they exist. There is only the deity. Where is you? You're not there. There is only the deity. So, anyway, and if you're going into this not through the yogic path or through bhakti, or you're going through Vedantic path, suppose, then what happens? One by one, all things which are not real are eliminated by reasoning. And when they are eliminated, what remains is that which cannot be reasoned about, which is only one, and there are no two there. So, therefore dhyana is effortless. You cannot say, I am going to do dhyana. You can say, strictly according to yogic terminology, you can say, I am going to do dharana. From dharana, one goes automatically into dhyana. And in that dhyana, in the highest state of dhyana, the very person who is meditating has ceased to exist. There is only meditation, which means the little individual is gone and there is only the Purusha as reflected in the chitta, which is free of all vrittis, and therefore there are no little I's running around there. I mean capital I's, not this. That is called that. When that happens, dhyana has now culminated into samadhi. Now there is a question of different kinds of samadhi. Patanjali has classified different states of samadhi. Says there is savikalpa samadhi, nirvikalpa samadhi, savija samadhi, and so on and so forth. This is only based on whether they are permanent or temporary. The first kind of samadhi state is when one goes into a trance, experiences and finds out that the limitations are gone, all vrittis are gone, there is the Purusha shining in the chitta. This is the first state. But then you come back from that. When you come back to the normal state, you are again in the conditioned world with a remembrance of that unconditional feeling. Why? Because there are still the seeds of desire lurking in us in somewhere, hidden away. The vrittis have been eliminated for some time, but they come back. Now through constant practice, one finally eliminates even the seeds of that desire. When no seeds are there, then it becomes nirvikalpa. There are no vikalpas. There are no modifications. In that state, there is only that, only tat. So these are the different types of samadhi. So samadhi by definition means the complete quietness of the chitta, where the reflection only of Purusha takes place, or as some say, only Purusha exists. And there are no other differentiations, but there is eternal peace and freedom. So this is the culmination of yoga. So dhyana, therefore, is a completely effortless, and it need not always proceed from going through all the different grades, all the different processes. It can even happen suddenly to somebody, but you will come back from it with the remembrance of it and will say, I want to go back, it was wonderful. You probably may not even know how. It happens sometimes when everything is quiet and you're just sitting, nothing is happening, you're peaceful, then suddenly something happens, nice and wonderful and flashing. But the moment you try to grasp it and reproduce it, it is gone. This is the nature of dhyana. So many people successfully stop the experience of samadhi happening by wanting every day to get the same thing that they got at some point. Because when it actually happens, it may be each day different from the other. But we want the same thing that is repeated. I'll give you an example. One day I go up to my terrace. I'm talking about the spontaneous happening of dhyana sometimes and samadhi. Even a person who has not gone through all yogic processes, but it's a good thing to happen because you know something like that exists and then you're trying to find it. Then you may get to know the different ways and means. Okay, I go up to my terrace. Suddenly I open the door and I'm there. I look up. Unexpectedly, there's a huge full moon standing there. For a second, everything is blown. I'm not thinking of anything. I'm just looking at that wonderful moon, full moon. Maybe I was having a quarrel with somebody. I came here, I've forgotten that. I'm sitting there or standing there and just looking at that moon. For a second, I'm not thinking about myself or my problems. This is to remember this. There's only the moon and me. Fine. It is a state of dhyana, spontaneous. I didn't bring it about. I am totally overwhelmed by it. I am looking at it. But in 1 minute it is taken away, in 1 second. Why? Because I start comparing. 4 years ago, when I was in Kadgodam, Bareilly, I went for a walk and I looked up and I saw the moon. Now this is gone because my head is crowded with the memory of that moon. Samadhi is gone, dhyana is gone, everything is gone. I am comparing. Now while comparison in some ways is good, comparison in these matters is dangerous. Not dangerous, I mean, it's an obstacle, let's say. If I had just looked there and not thought about any other moons which I have seen, which actually don't exist now but are there only in my memory, I am substituting what is actually there with that which is in my memory. And what is in my memory is always something that happened in the past. So I am not living in the present, I am living in a memory in the past. I have successfully thwarted my dhyana and very successfully got away from samadhi by thinking that I am doing the right thing. These are all things, very subtle things. I am just talking to you. Think about it. You hardly get people discussing these matters. Anyway, so from yama niyama After all the Angas, we have come to Samadhi. Actually, this culminates samyama of yoga. But I have a few points. It's basically, I am taking it from the book written by Sri M. There's one chap called Sri M, so he writes these things. What are the obstacles to Samadhi? What are the main obstacles that prevent one from entering that which is called Samadhi? Please, I told you some time back, here Samadhi doesn't mean final death. Most people say, oh, somebody's Samadhi is there, somebody is dead, there's a grave there. I'm not talking about that Samadhi. Samadhi, as Yoga Sutras explain, a state of absolute, unconditioned, supreme consciousness, which luckily for us can be found by all if proper methods are followed. So, what are the obstacles? Patanjali in the Samadhi Pada, which is the last part, section of his Sutras, Sutra 30 explains obstacles, which are Vyadhi, Dhyana, Samshaya, Alasya, Avirati, Bhranti, Darshana, Alabhya, Bhumika, Anavasiratvam, Chitta Vikshepa, and so on. Which means, let me explain, Greek and Latin. These obstacles and distractions are 1. Sickness, 2. Dullness of mind, 3. Doubt, carelessness, laziness, addictions, false views, non-attainment of a spiritual state and therefore unhappiness about that, and instability. Here are the obstacles. We all know these obstacles. To some extent, in some percentage or the other, most people have to go through these obstacles. Of these distractions from Samadhi, the most important, sickness. A sick person cannot do anything and meditate. So therefore, yama niyamas, control of food and asanas are prescribed to keep the body from falling sick. Even then, sometimes it can fall sick. It is the nature of the body. So yama niyamas, asana, dullness, pranayama, proper pranayama can take off your dullness. Doubt. Doubt is an obstacle, but it can be cleared only when the doubts are cleared. So study is important. So adhyaya. Carelessness, which means some people are doing all this to practice yoga. I am not like that. I can be careless about some points. It's okay with me. Carelessness. What I do. Laziness. All the time sleeping, thinking that I am in Samadhi. Now this happens also. When you sit down to meditate, I have also gone through all this, so I am telling you. Sit down to meditate, the meditation has deepened and is enjoyable. Suppose. Then I say, why should I sit? Let me lie down and enjoy this. Finished. Fast asleep. Because the dividing line between Shushukti, deep sleep, and Turiya is very, very thin. So when the mind is not clear enough to attain to Turiya, it will lapse into sleep, which is okay at some point. We all need sleep to some extent, I'm not saying that. But the constantly sleeping and not doing anything is laziness. That certainly is an obstacle. Addictions. Do we need to discuss addictions to the young? I don't think so. Today, the biggest problem, for instance, is Punjab. Drug addiction among the young is the biggest problem. And believe me, it is also so in Kerala now, slowly growing. Now, what happens with this addiction? That you begin to enjoy chemically something, and therefore your mind slowly becomes dull and cannot go into that which is beyond the mind. And you become lazy, you cannot do any work. Why would you want to work if you can satisfy your so-called desire for happiness and peace with $10? Why would you? So, I'm just giving addictions. There are also other addictions. Internet is good. Without internet, we won't be sitting here and doing things. Technology is good, but it can also be highly addictive. I know people spend hours together just looking at. Then, false views. There is no harm in false. Many people have false views. But to say that these false views are the right views, this is the problem. If you accept that this could be a false view and try to sort it out, it's okay. But have false view and say, no, this is the right view, then we are in trouble. Then, and so on. Instability, of course. One day I'm doing something, next day I'm doing something else, third day I'm doing something else. I'm emotionally unstable. Small trigger is enough to build a rage in me. All this is a sign. All these are obstacles. And they have described how to get over it before. We're just pointing out an end. Sutra 31 says something very interesting. A dissatisfied, despairing body, because of these above conditionings, distractions, a dissatisfied, despairing body, and unsteady inhalation and exhalation accompany the distractions. If you are distracted in any one of the above mentioned distractions, you will notice that it is always accompanied by unsteady breathing, inhalation and exhalation. And therefore the remedy lies in doing proper pranayama so that your breathing becomes steady and rhythmic, and your inhalation and exhalation are not unsteady but very steady, which is why it is mentioned. Also, to counteract these distractions, practice dharana, one-pointedness. Keep practice, it's not easy in one day. So this is Sutra 32. Now Sutra 33 is very interesting. It describes the opposites by which you can bring about a change in that which is negative. How? Purification of the mind of distractions can be brought about by Maitri, cultivation of friendliness, compassion, happiness, and equanimity, not only in conditions of pleasure, but even in conditions of dissatisfaction. Recognition and non-recognition of merit. Now, which means purification of the mind. They describe many negative things. They said if you want to get free of that, develop or cultivate the opposite of that. Deliberately. Why? If you hate somebody, instead of that, develop friendship towards them. That distraction is gone forever. If you feel having cruel thoughts about somebody, cultivate compassion about them. So, try, even if under worst conditions, to deliberately not sit down and cry, but be happy. This is where jokes come in. Study a lot of jokes so that even in the worst conditions, you hear somebody's joke and you're laughing. Your mind has changed, at least for a short time. Or go and look at the trees or the paddy fields. Make your mind happy. If you do that, you'll be able to counter the depressing thoughts that come into the mind. Or listening to good music. Go and see a good movie. It's okay. Do bhajan kirtan. So, the key tenets of yoga, Patanjali's yoga, are: 1, that the body and the mind influence each other mutually. Different postures called asanas influence the mind by ensuring a healthy body. And more importantly, they regulate the functioning of the endocrine glands that secrete serotonin, dopamine, and other neurotransmitters. We discussed this before. That greatly influence our moods and contribute to the feel-good factor. We discussed this. That the mind, when free of distractions and impurities, experiences pure, unmodified consciousness called the Purusha, which is supra-blissful and beyond all conditioning. That by consciously cultivating friendliness, compassion and equanimity, the mind becomes tranquil in the midst of all circumstances. Here, friendliness and compassion are not moral precepts, but active practical methods by which the mind becomes tranquil. Don't do it as a moral act. It's good for you to do it. It's a technique. One's behavior in day-to-day life is therefore self-monitored and adapted to bring about an inner change. So says M. This can be defined as outer and inner mindfulness. Yoga rests on the principle that as both are interrelated, inner and outer, they are effective practical techniques to bring about step-by-step transformation. Now here I have given an interesting example, a practical example. Stand before a mirror. Observe the expression on your face. Does it look dull, gaunt, sad, angry? Force yourself to smile. It's a yogic exercise. Believe me, it works. Force yourself to smile. Think of a funny joke, or just, even if that is not occurring to you, bring about an artificial expression of smiling widely or laughing at something. Make sure that the door is closed, otherwise somebody might think you have become a nut. So, think of a funny, or bring about an expression on your face of smiling widely or laughing or something like that. Perhaps just at your own comic face. You can laugh at that also. When you are actually happy, what happens? Why I said this? When you are actually happy, the brain activates the facial muscles to bring about a smiling expression, laughing expression. It's the brain that activates. It works both ways according to yoga. When you change your expression deliberately, the message goes to the brain that the facial muscles are in a smile mode, and the brain links it to the pleasure or happiness center, and lo, happiness is generated and is again transmitted to the facial muscle, and you smile genuinely. It's called biofeedback actually. These are so there are some other methods to pull out of miserable, sad states. Note Sutra 31 that explains that a despairing and dissatisfied person's inhalation and exhalation are unsteady. Therefore, steady the inhalation and exhalation. That also can restore some amount of equilibrium. So, one of the methods to restore balance and tranquility is by expulsion and retention of breath. So, I described the Hamsa method to you. It's one of the wonderful ways to bring about a balance in inhalation and exhalation. Or if you do that, it is good. Or the mind should get involved in a thing which you are seriously interested in. That will also restore equality. Equanimity. Or by meditation on pure light. What do they mean by meditation on pure light? Which means looking at light and then closing your eyes and trying to visualize that light within and meditating on it. That's one of the ways of meditating on the light. They call it pure light because it is not external light but internal light. Of course, there is one condition where the mind is free, which is very difficult to attain, which is free from attachment. Let's leave it for the time being. Not that easy. Now, the mastering of meditation or dharana and dhyana can be applied from the smallest to the greatest. How? Such a mind, yours and mine, with minimum fluctuations, some will be there, little bit, is like a clear, transparent jewel and assumes the colors of the objects near it and thus unites you to what you see. There are no two things. When the mind is completely clear and transparent, then you develop the capacity to give so much attention to something that you are fully absorbed in it. There is no difference between that and you. Okay, so I think we will stop with this because if I go to the next, it goes on to the Upanishad and deeper and deeper and so on. So we have kind of worked out roughly as much as we could the science of yoga. We can have some questions and answers now. Tomorrow we will have a review. And therefore, anything that you need to discuss in this matter, we can discuss. Now, if you have any questions, particularly to what we dealt with today, we can take it up and discuss.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, so in the initial very first class, you said that read Raja Yoga by Swami Vivekananda, but you also mentioned that do not practice. I also got your book, but there are some asanas in that book also. So,
Asanas.
I mean, some of the pictures are there in your book, right? At the end, I haven't read the complete book.
In the Raja Yoga of
No,
Swami
not
Vivekananda.
your book. Your
Oh,
book.
my book.
Yes.
Ah.
So you said some of these practices can be dangerous, right? So can you tell us why
No,
did
no,
you
no,
say
no,
that?
no, no, no. Vishal, I didn't say that the practices of asanas per se are dangerous. Or from my book, there are some asanas, yes. What I said was, since they are to do with the body and very interconnected with the mind and the brain, I said that you need to learn under proper direction. See, you suppose you are doing an asana like Sarvangasana or Shirsasana. Imagine what will happen if you fall down. So, have an instructor who can teach you practically how to do it. Even great experts have fallen sometimes. I fell down once. I thought I was a great expert and I think I became too proud about it. So one day in Sarvangasana I tried to swing my legs and anyway, it took me 3 months to get my back straight. So it's straight now, okay. So we need to get some teacher. There are many yoga institutes now where you can learn how to do yoga. Even online is there, but I always prefer that such things should be done by personally. One thing. The second thing which I said, don't practice, read, was a particular exercise described by Swami Vivekananda in his commentaries on the Yoga Sutras, which is now brought out in a small book form called Raja Yoga. Last time I showed you that book. The problem with that is, Swamiji himself has said, do not practice this without proper guidance. And it deals with your psychic energy systems, where he says, take a inhale and hold your breath and then knock the breath against the bottom of your spine. Now this, while it's an effective technique, it needs to be done only with proper guidance and proper preliminary preparation, because you are dealing with some 100 megaton energy here. It's not a joke. So if your connections and wiring and all is not properly done, the fuse may blow off. So you have to be. This is not a joke. That is why I said, even Swamiji himself says that you have to do it only under proper instruction. And I can assure you that in the Ramakrishna mission, which was started by Swami Vivekananda, very few people actually practice this technique. I don't know if they do at all. They do more with japa and service to others, which is good enough. So one has to be, that's what I meant.
Good evening, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I have a doubt that what's the difference between the state you mentioned, Dhyana and Samadhi, and how do we go from Dhyana to Samadhi? Means what are the differences? It's still not very clear.
I know that it's not very clear. Now we have to go back to Dharana, which we discussed first. Dharana is one-pointed attention, right? Now, when that one-pointed attention becomes, in the beginning there's a lot of effort required to bring about one-pointed attention, because our mind is always distracted, is wandering. When I think of one thing, immediately something else comes. Then through training I learned Dharana, how to bring about one-pointed attention. Now when the Dharana becomes effortless through practice and through following the other yama niyamas of the yogic teachings, when this Dharana becomes effortless, it culminates in Dhyana. Now during the Dhyana stage, I am clarifying your doubt, during the Dhyana stage there is still me meditating. I am in a state of complete peace, but I am aware that it will stop after some time. Now it is stretching nicely, almost effortlessly. Samadhi is the state when, in that calmness and tranquility of dhyana, I have even forgotten my own existence. There is only an all-pervasive calmness and tranquility, which is part of the mind which is free of all vrittis. It's a subtle difference, of course, between dhyana and samadhi. I hope you got what I'm trying to say. In dhyana, there is still me. Samadhi, there is no me. There is a me, it's a larger me, not this small me.
Hello, sir. Good evening, sir.
Hello, good evening.
Sir, this is regarding yesterday's you talked about Bodhidharma. So I was
Yes.
just studying about him. Like he took the study of Buddhism and cultivated to China, which eventually became Kung Fu and the Shaolin. And in India, we don't know much about him, but in China, he's a very respectable
Oh,
person.
yes, Bodhidharma.
Yes, sir. So yesterday we were, I mean, talking about an experience like he went to a hill and then two Chinese were looking for him. And
Wait a
then there
minute,
was,
we don't know if they were Chinese, but two people were looking for it.
yes, sir.
Probably so.
Sir, so what does that mean? Like you mentioned that he was just having his soup. Bodhidharma said that I was having my soup, but those other two people were thinking about the I mean, they were distracted. They were thinking about the Zen Buddhism and the Zen meditation. So, what does that imply? I mean, they were not focused on that, or what was that
No,
imply?
there are two parts to this. They really wanted to know about Zen, no question about that. 100% they were sincere about that. Bodhidharma was trying to make them aware that one-pointedness is essential to whatever they are seeking. And one-pointedness cannot come about by being not one-pointed in other activities but only in trying to meditate. In daily life, unless you develop the capacity or the art of one-pointedness, it is not possible to shift it to the spiritual practice. See, because all the day we are distracted. One thought, next thought. And then when we sit down to meditate, we want everything to stop and one thought to be meditated upon. It doesn't work that way, the mind. So when the mind learns to put complete attention on what the task at hand, anytime, then it becomes easy when you sit down to meditate to become on point. Otherwise, that shift is very difficult. Therefore, he was trying to tell them, look, I am drinking my soup. My entire attention is on that soup right now. While you are drinking your soup, but you are thinking how to find Zen, how to find a Satori. He said, if you will only put complete attention in what you are doing, that is the way to find Zen. This is what he was trying to convey. He was not scolding them or saying that they are doing something wrong. He was only saying one-pointed attention in anything. See, a yogi, imagine a yogi driving a car on the busy street. Do you think the yogi will be meditating while driving the car? Danger to himself and danger to the poor people on the street. That he is giving complete attention to the driving is his meditation at that point. At that point. Taking care of all that is required. So this is what it means.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So what happens is that when I sit for trying to meditate, then some thoughts are reduced, and then a deep fear sort of sets in.
Fear.
And yes, sir. And then
Mm.
again, the mind becomes active, and I get lots of thoughts of different types. So please help me, like, how to deal with this.
May I ask you, what is this fear that comes?
So probably it's the fear of uncertainty.
But why does it come only when you sit down to meditate? Have you thought about it?
No, sir, I haven't thought about it.
Or does it happen when you're not meditating also?
Yes, sir, it happens then also.
So I'll tell you now. Yes, now that you've told me this much, that means you are always worried about uncertainty about various factors. But in daily life, you're so caught up in various things that you don't have time to think about it. Now when you sit down to meditate, you're not doing anything except trying to meditate. That is when this thought comes in. It's normal and natural. So what you should do is try to do things in your daily life which will assuage the uncertainties that you have on one side. On the other, when you sit down to meditate, give this into your brain, this idea that if I meditate, this uncertainty may be solved, could be solved. Then that meditation will become an incentive for you to sit down and do it. So, because whatever we feed into the brain, it sticks after a while. So you tell the brain yourself, your brain is talking to your brain, one part of your mind is talking to another. Say, listen, if I meditate, I might be able to solve this uncertainty which I have. So it is imperative that I meditate. And then sit down. See how it works. Okay, one way. The other way is to get absorbed in something that you really enjoy in meditation so that this distracting thought doesn't come. For instance, if you enjoy music of any kind, I would prefer music that makes you calm and tranquil, not that which makes you jump up and down. If you enjoy that, put on your headphones, okay? Listen to that music. You know what I love to listen to? The flute or the Shanai, Bansuri, the Bansuri that is great. What is the man who plays the flute? Who's so beautiful. Who? Hari Chaurasia. Get some recording, put it in your ears. Or this beautiful Shanai that the Ustad Bismillah Khan used to go every morning at 4 o'clock when the doors open in Banaras, the Kashi Vishwanath temple, and that Shanai. Or other beautiful music, M.S. Subbalakshmi, whatever you like, you put on headphones and sit down, listen to that and go into meditation. There is no space there for fear to come.
Okay, sir.
Try.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, sir. Sir, today, earlier in the... Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You're
Sir,
always audible.
okay. So you mentioned that thought is also a vritti. So
The what? The what?
Thought
Yes.
is a vritti. So you said
Thought
that...
is the vritti. Actually, vritti means thought.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So when a person tries to practice dharana, that is one-pointedness, you said that there are many distractions. You call them as vrittis. So the thing at which the person is concentrating, that is also a vritti, right? By that logic?
Absolutely.
Okay. So now, sir, if we need a vritti to start off with dharana, then how is it really possible to lose that vritti to attain the state of dhyana?
Exactly. So,
Okay.
Follow up.
Yes, sir. Follow up. So, sir, then how can dhyana really be vritti nirodha, as you said? So, does vritti nirodha means thoughtlessness? And sir, you also mentioned the example of the devotees. You said that devotees focus on the deity or the god, and in the end, when they attain the final stage, they lose their sense of self, and the only thing that remains is the deity or the god. So, is god or deity, that too, is it a vritti? So this is what I want to know, sir. Vritti nirodha. So if nothing is there, if vritti nirodha means the state of nothingness, then what is it that actually lies there after?
First, let me clarify. Vritti nirodha is not a state of nothingness. It is a somethingness which is not a vritti. Now, the idea that I want to meditate is also a vritti. I am meditating is also a vritti, but it is a sattva vritti. So, see, I clarified this. There are many vrittis, distractions. There are tamoguna vrittis. There are rajasic vrittis. And then from there, for tamoguna vrittis to change, you need to have action, rajasic vrittis. From rajasic vrittis, your mind gets purified, especially when the activity is selfless. They are also vrittis, agreed. Now, when they get purified, then we get sattvic vrittis. Sattvic vrittis means vrittis, even compassion, caring for somebody, doing something good, it's still a vritti because it's still part of thought. As we know it, thought as we know it, remember. Thought as we know it, conditioned thought. Okay. Now, so from tamas to rajas to sattva, your vrittis have come. Now that is the highest purified vrittis that you can have. When this happens, when you also are aware that this is also a vritti, however good and necessary for you, when you understand this, and then when you sit down, then by itself, you cannot do anything about it. Because if I try to stop that vritti also using my mind, I am creating a fresh vritti. So, when I am completely settled down with this understanding that now I can do nothing, I can only sit quiet. Then what happens is pure consciousness from which thoughts proceed only remains. There is no vibration coming out of it. See, thought means a frequency arising from the mind, different frequencies. Now, all the frequencies have become still and there is only the original source from which everything came. We cannot call it thought as we know it, but in a way it is awareness. It's pure awareness, pure consciousness, which has no trace of you or me. But there still is a shadow of a vritti which is enjoying it. Now, when you say chitta vritti nirodha, that shadow is not included. All vrittis which are distractions to that state are gone, but there has to be at least a shadow of a vritti to enjoy that state where all the other vrittis have disappeared. It has to be there. Otherwise you cannot, and you won't even know, you are not even aware what's happening. Then it becomes unconsciousness. We are not aiming at unconsciousness. We are not aiming at shunyata. We are aiming at purnata. That's why I have a little bit of difference with the Buddhist teachings sometimes. And finally shunyata. I think they say shunyata because there is no other comparison, probably. So the difference is very subtle. Through the practice of yoga, chitta vritti nirodha, we are not going to become a vegetable. That's what I mean.
So, sir, yogi in a person who is practicing dharana and eventually if he attains dhyana, so he would be aware of any sound that is happening around him, right?
What do you mean? While he's in samadhi state, he will not be aware of any sound that happening anywhere. But he is not going to be always in samadhi. He will come back. The difference is the person who goes into samadhi and the person who comes out of samadhi is a new person. Of course, he will hear the sounds which are happening, but nothing will distract him ever. A person who goes into samadhi doesn't lose the power of his senses. Please understand this. He doesn't. In fact, his sensory perceptions are heightened, but there are no more distractions.
Also, sir, you mentioned, you cited the example of you going to the terrace and looking at the moon, and you said that for a momentary uh, or a fraction of a second, you were able to attain the state of dhyana. Sir, so can I call it as
Wait.
savoring the? Okay.
Yes, you can call it as tasting that which is beyond. It's just a taste. It may not be the ultimate, but it is just a taste, which can be possible for anybody at any time. Need not be the moon.
And the practice of dharana can increase the duration of that.
Of course, exactly. Because then what happens, if you are practicing dharana, then at that point also, you are fully with that moon. You are not comparing with yesterday, day after, and so on and so forth. Anyway, all this is food for thought. Think about it. The answer that comes from you while you think about it is more valuable than what I am telling you. What I give is food for thought. Understand this.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That's all, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we'll meet again tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll sum up from the beginning to the end, and then any questions, answers which are left, we'll sort it out. Okay, thank you. Namaskar. Hari Om.